see that.
Good
Yes,
evening,
please.
ma'am.
Yes, yes. Good evening, madam.
Good evening, please.
Shall we start now?
Yes.
Okay. So a very good evening to everyone over here. Today we are gathered here virtually on the occasion of World Heart Day to celebrate and commemorate this day, the 29th September 2021. So this World Heart Day was first launched in 2000 by the World Heart Federation, which happens to be the biggest platform for creating awareness regarding cardiovascular diseases. It was first decided that it will be done on the last Sunday of every September every year. But later on, it was finalized that 29 September will be the better one. So it has been celebrated on 29 September each year thereafter. So this is a day which informs millions of people around the globe regarding cardiovascular diseases, and that this disease is a killer disease which claims almost more than 20 million lives each year. And it highlights the measures that an individual can take or adapt to improve his health, improve his lifestyle, and so that he prevents himself from being affected with CVD. Usually it is celebrated in most of the government as well as non-government organizations by way of marathons, walks, public talks, etc., etc. But now in the post-COVID era, although those were the ways how we connected through heart to heart, but now in the post-COVID era, the emphasis is on connecting digitally. So the theme of this year's World Heart Day celebration is to use the heart to connect digitally, be it with the doctor, be it with the colleagues, be it with friends, family, or loved ones. Because in today's scenario, people are scared to go to the hospitals even if they are suffering. Therefore, here one very reason for concern is that young hearts are now more affected with cardiovascular diseases, maybe because of stress in work or whatever. Hence, identifying the risk factors for these premature heart attacks is necessary to modify the risk factors, and even more important is to frame strategies so that they can be prevented in this young population, because they are the future. So with this backdrop, we at the Department of Anatomy, AIIMS Guwahati, wish to take part in the celebration of such an important theme, health-related theme, by way of this webinar, targeting everyone at large and the young population, the young minds in particular. Learning and understanding the anatomy of the blood supply of the heart and how it can be correlated with the clinical consequences, we feel our students will be better positioned to handle CVD, that is cardiovascular diseases, either in the patients, in their relatives, or even in themselves. I consider this my proud privilege to be hosting this webinar. We have here with us Dr. Gitanjali Padmanabhan, Director, AIIMS Bhubaneswar, the Mentor Institute of AIIMS Guwahati. Madam has always been a source of inspiration to us from the very beginning. Welcome, ma'am. We are honored to have you here. We have here with us our invited speaker, Dr. Ananda Bakshi, Senior Medical Consultant and Cardiologist, ILS Hospital, Kolkata. We heartily welcome you, sir. We also welcome our Dr. Muralidhar Reddy Sangam, Additional Professor of Anatomy, AIIMS Guwahati, who is also a speaker for today's webinar. I take this opportunity to welcome all the participants of the webinar from the medical colleges and institutions across the entire country, including those from AIIMS Guwahati. I'm sure we all will have an enlightening session with respect to the blood supply of the heart, along with an overview of its clinical aspect, to the wonderful deliberations of our eminent speakers. I would now like to request Dr. Director, ma'am, to kindly speak a few words for us, to all of us. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. The organizing chairperson, Professor Runmani Dekha, the speakers, Dr. Ananda Bakshi and Dr. Muralidhar Reddy Sangam, all the participants, the faculty of AIIMS Guwahati who have joined here, and our faculty from other institutions as well. Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to give a few words on this occasion. We all, go through this kind of pay lip service to the various days. But I think once in a way we need to sit and introspect and see how we can even look at our own heart health. This year's theme is extremely interesting to say that we need to connect, and we can connect in many ways than one, and use the digital platforms to also not just monitor our cardiac health but also keep improving our cardiac health. And if you look at heart health as a whole, there are many things which we can do without much effort. But the point is, do we do that? Do we sit and, can we cut down on smoking or stop smoking altogether? Can we restrict the amount of alcohol we are taking? Can we increase the amount of fiber in our diet? Can we reduce the kind of food which we are very fond of eating, with a lot of fat and with a lot of, calories? Can we reduce the amount of number of calories we eat every day? Can we do a simple exercise and exercise for at least half an hour to 45 minutes every day? So these are some small, simple changes which we can do if we put our mind to it. But the point is, we need to be pushed to doing it. And sometimes the time when we think of taking action on this, it is far too late. And that's the sad part of it. Because the initial signs of any kind of coronary artery disease or any kind of heart disease, we miss out on the many symptoms, we miss out on all these things. And by the time we decide to take action, sometimes it is far too late. And so we need to actually listen to our heart, I would say, and listen to the speakers who are going to speak to us today, and learn from whatever they have to say, and sort of introspect on where our health is at this point of time, and where would I like my health to be maybe 6 months from now, 1 year from now. So we need to make a plan on these things, and I think these kind of days are very good for us to make a kind of plan for ourselves. So I congratulate the Department of Anatomy and Dr. Roonmani Dekha and her team for organizing this, for taking the, for taking the trouble to organize this, because many anatomy departments tend to lie low and don't bother to, do any kind of clinical interaction. And so I'm very happy that the anatomy department of AIIMS Guwahati has come forward to organize this on this day. And so I congratulate you all. And I also look forward, and unfortunately I have many other programs, so I won't be staying with you, but I'll just listen to the first few minutes at least. And if I can, I will come back. So congratulations once again. And I thank the speakers for agreeing to speak to us, and wishing you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your kind words and encouragement. Without much delay, I think we shall start our session today. So our first speaker is Dr. Muralidhar Reddy Sangam. Dr. Muralidhar has completed MBBS from Rangaraya Medical College, Kakinada, Andhra Pradesh in the year 2003. He postgraduated from Guntur Medical College, Andhra Pradesh. He has served at NRI Medical College, Guntur in various designations, including a substantial period as Professor and Head of Anatomy. He is presently working as Additional Professor, Department of Anatomy at AIIMS Guwahati since December 2020. Dr. Reddy has many publications to his credit in both national as well as international journals. So today he will be speaking to us on the anatomy of the blood supply of the heart. Over to you, Dr. Murli.
Thank you, madam. So, respected Dr. Geetanjali Padmanabhan, Director of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Bhubaneswar. Respected Dr. Roonmani Dekha, Professor and Head of the Department of Anatomy, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Guwahati. Respected Dr. Ananda Bagchi, Senior Cardiologist and guest speaker of today's program. All the faculty of anatomy and AIIMS Guwahati, and my dear students, a very good evening to you all. So today I am going to discuss blood blood supply of the heart, so which will be a brief background for you to understand the so I would like to start sharing my screen. So is it visible?
Yes, it's visible.
So the blood supply of the heart. So as we have already mentioned, this program is mainly intended for first MBBS students. So the discussion will be limited to that extent. Before discussing the blood supply of the heart, so let us have a brief background of the external features. Then you can clearly understand the distribution or course of the coronary arteries. Now here you can see on the left side there is anterior view of the heart, and on the right side there is posterior view. So the heart is provided with the heart is provided with an apex, which is a conical projection formed by the left ventricle. So it is directed downwards, forwards, and to the left. Then the base of the heart is the posterior surface. Major part of the base of the heart is formed by the left ventricle, and a small part, 1/3 of the base of the heart, is formed by the right ventricle. Now the base of the heart is bounded above by the bifurcation of the pulmonary trunk, below by the atrioventricular groove. Now this is the posterior part of the atrioventricular groove. Then on the right side by the right border, extending from the opening of superior vena cava to the opening of inferior vena cava, and on the left side by left pair of pulmonary veins. So base or posterior surface. Then if you see the borders, the right border is completely formed by the right atrium, extending from superior vena cava to the inferior vena cava. Then the inferior border extends from the opening of inferior vena cava to the apex, and major part of the inferior border is formed by the right ventricle. And this inferior border or inferior margin is called acute margin, because the sternocostal surface or the anterior surface of the heart makes an acute angle with the inferior surface or the diaphragmatic surface. Then the left border of the heart extends from the left auricle to the apex, and major part of the left border is formed by the left ventricle. Superior border is broken by the presence of these great vessels. So if you draw an imaginary line joining the two auricles, that represents the superior border. Now here, the surface what you are seeing is the sternocostal surface or the anterior surface formed by the right atrium, and this is the right auricle. A small projection extending from the upper part of the right atrium is the right auricle. Then major part of the sternocostal surface is formed by the right ventricle, and here you can see the left ventricle. There is a groove intervening in between the right atrium and the right ventricle. So this is the right atrioventricular groove. Then the groove intervening in between the left auricle and the left ventricle. So this is left atrioventricular groove. Then the groove intervening in between the right ventricle and the left ventricle. So this is anterior interventricular groove. So in sternocostal surface, you can see right atrioventricular groove, left atrioventricular groove, anterior interventricular groove. Then here you can see the diaphragmatic surface of the heart between posterior atrioventricular groove and the inferior border. And major part of this diaphragmatic surface is formed by the left ventricle, and a small part is formed by the right ventricle. Now the groove present in between these two ventricles, here you can see the posterior interventricular groove. The posterior interventricular groove is meeting with the posterior atrioventricular groove. This meeting point of posterior atrioventricular groove and posterior interventricular groove, you call it as crux of the heart. And here you can see clearly demarcate the interatrial groove. So meeting point of all these is called crux of the heart. Then coming to the left surface, the part intervening in between the left border and left pair of pulmonary veins is called left surface, and this is formed by the left atrium and major part by the left ventricle. So with this background of external features, let us try to understand the blood supply of the heart. Now here you can see the wall of the heart. We know that the wall of the heart is composed of 3 layers. The outer layer is epicardium, which is the serous membrane, which is the visceral layer of the serous pericardium. Then the middle layer, the cardiac muscle, it is the myocardium. And the inner layer is the endocardium. Now, how the blood vessels are arranged and how they are distributed. Just beneath the epicardium, you can see the coronary arteries. So you call them as epicardial arteries. Then the coronary arteries, they branch, and these branches, they extend into the substance of the myocardium. There are 2 ways of distribution of these intramural arteries. There are the type 1 arteries. They arborize within the myocardium. They are restricted to the myocardium. Whereas the type 2 arteries, they extend into the depth. They reach the subendocardial region and they anastomose with the other arteries, forming subendocardial plexus. Now, major part of the myocardium is being supplied by the blood vessels which are being present just beneath the epicardium, that is epicardial arteries. About 100 micron thickness of the wall of the heart is being nourished by the blood which is present within the lumen of the heart. Now, heart is supplied by coronary arteries, right coronary artery and left coronary artery. Now, these coronary arteries, the term corona is a Latin word which literally means crown, and there is another meaning garland. So, coronary arteries, as they encircle the organ like a crown, they are described so. There are 2 coronary arteries which are the branches arising from ascending aorta. Now, the heart is formed, embryologically, the heart is formed by the fusion of 2 primitive endothelial heart tubes. So, heart itself is a blood vessel. Now, the coronary arteries are the branches arising from the aorta and they are supplying the blood vessel, the heart. So, you can describe the coronary arteries as vasa vasorum, an artery supplying another artery. So, while studying the histological picture of an artery, within the tunica adventitia, we represent the small blood vessels, vasa vasorum. So, coronary arteries can be best described as the largest vasa vasorum. Now, these coronary arteries are arising from aorta. Ascending aorta is beginning from the outflow part of the left ventricle, that is aortic orifice. At the aortic orifice, you have got aortic valve. Now, this aortic valve is provided with 3 cusps: anterior leaflet, right posterior leaflet, and left posterior leaflet. Now, you can see the space above the leaflet, that is what you call it as sinus. Accordingly, we have got 3 aortic sinus: anterior aortic sinus, left posterior aortic sinus, and right posterior aortic sinus. Now, these coronary arteries, they take origin from these aortic sinuses. Right coronary artery arises from anterior aortic sinus. Left coronary artery arises from left posterior aortic sinus. Now, what is non-coronary sinus? Right posterior aortic sinus is non-coronary. Right posterior aortic sinus is non-coronary. Based on its origin, these sinuses are named accordingly. This anterior aortic sinus is referred to as right aortic sinus, right coronary sinus. Left posterior aortic sinus is referred to as left coronary sinus, and the non-coronary sinus is referred to as posterior aortic sinus. In clinical books, they are described like that. But in anatomy, anterior aortic sinus, left posterior aortic sinus. Now, let us study the distribution of the right coronary artery. The right coronary artery is arising from anterior aortic sinus. Then the artery is running in between the right auricle and the pulmonary trunk and enters into the right atrioventricular groove. The artery is running down in the right atrioventricular groove up to the inferior border. Then it is winding around the inferior border and enters into the posterior part of atrioventricular groove, crosses the crux of the heart, and terminates by anastomosing with circumflex branch of left coronary artery. The artery is running in the right atrioventricular groove, winding around the inferior border of the heart, enters into the posterior atrioventricular groove, and terminates by anastomosing with the circumflex branch of left coronary artery. Now, the branches of this right coronary artery. The first branch is right conus artery. This right conus artery supplies the upper part of right ventricle. This outflow part of right ventricle, you call it as pulmonary conus or infundibulum. Right conus artery anastomoses with left conus artery, which is a branch of anterior interventricular artery, forming an arterial anastomotic necklace at the pulmonary conus, that is Vujon's artery, circle of Vujon's. The other artery is SA nodal artery. SA nodal artery, after its origin from the right coronary artery, passes towards the right side, in between the right auricle and the aorta, passes in front of superior vena cava and reaches the upper part of sulcus terminalis. At the upper end of the sulcus terminalis, there is SA node, which is the pacemaker of the heart, and this artery supplies the SA node. So SA nodal artery, arising from the right coronary artery, passing in between the right auricle and the aorta, passing in front of superior vena cava and supplying the SA node. Then the right coronary artery gives off anterior atrial branches, which supply the right atrium, and anterior ventricular branches, which supply major part of the right ventricle. A large ventricular branch, which is running along the inferior margin, towards the apex, is called right marginal artery. As this artery is passing along the acute margin, it is also called acute marginal artery. Then the artery is entering into the posterior atrioventricular groove, where it gives off posterior atrial branches, which supply a small part of left atrium, ventricular branches, which supply the inferior surface of right ventricle, and the main artery is posterior interventricular artery. The posterior interventricular artery runs in posterior interventricular groove and terminates by anastomosing with anterior interventricular branch of left coronary artery. The posterior interventricular artery runs in posterior interventricular groove and terminates by anastomosing with anterior interventricular artery. Now, this posterior interventricular artery gives off ventricular branches which supply inferior surface of right ventricle and also the inferior surface of left ventricle. It gives off septal branches which supply posterior part of interventricular septum. The first septal branch of posterior interventricular artery is large and it supplies AV node. That large septal branch supplying AV node, which is present in triangle of Koch, is called AV nodal artery. So the distribution of posterior interventricular artery is, it is supplying the inferior surface of right ventricle, inferior surface of left ventricle, AV node, and posterior 1/3 of interventricular septum. So these are the various branches arising from right coronary artery. Now here you can see SA nodal artery. So this is the cut section of the aorta, where you can see the anterior aortic sinus, left posterior aortic sinus, from which the left coronary artery is arising, and non-coronary sinus. Right posterior aortic sinus is called non-coronary sinus. Now from the anterior aortic sinus, the right coronary artery is arising. From this, you can see the SA nodal artery, which is passing in between the right auricle and the aorta, and there is a variable distribution of this SA nodal artery. Sometimes it may pass in front of the superior vena cava, sometimes it encircles the superior vena cava, and sometimes it passes behind the superior vena cava to supply the SA node. And another variation here, you can see the right conus artery arising from right coronary artery is passing in front of the conus, the upper part of the right ventricle, pulmonary conus. Whereas the left conus artery arising from anterior interventricular artery, they are anastomosing in front of the conus. So this is what you call it as Vujon's arterial ring. Sometimes there may be a variation where this anastomosis may be present behind the conus. And sometimes the right coronary artery gives off an atrial branch which anastomoses with the atrial branch of left coronary artery, and this anastomosis is present behind the aorta, that is Kugel's arterial ring. An anastomosis between the atrial branch of right coronary artery and atrial branch of left coronary artery. So this is the distribution of right coronary artery, SCA nodal artery, right conus artery, then atrial branches, ventricular branches, acute marginal artery, posterior interventricular artery. So if you grossly study the distribution of right coronary artery, entire right atrium is supplied by right coronary artery, including SCA node, AV node. 65% of cases, SCA node is supplied by right coronary artery, and in 35% of the cases, it is supplied by circumflex branch of left coronary artery. Whereas AV node, in 80% of the cases, it is supplied by right coronary artery, and in 20% of the cases, it is supplied by circumflex branch of left coronary artery. So entire right atrium is supplied by right coronary artery. Then right ventricle, major part of the right ventricle, except a small portion of right ventricle adjacent to this anterior interventricular groove, it is supplied by right coronary artery. And if you see the diaphragmatic surface, entire diaphragmatic surface of right ventricle is supplied by right coronary artery. Left ventricle, diaphragmatic surface of the left ventricle, a small portion which is adjacent to this posterior interventricular groove is supplied by right coronary artery. Then a small portion of the left atrium. So right atrium, a small portion of left atrium, major part of right ventricle, except a small portion which is present adjacent to the anterior interventricular groove, and a small part of left ventricle which is adjacent to posterior part of interventricular groove, including SCA node and AV node, are supplied by right coronary artery. Then coming to the distribution of the left coronary artery. Left coronary artery arises from left posterior aortic sinus. Then the artery runs towards the left side behind the pulmonary trunk, and it divides into two branches, anterior interventricular artery and circumflex artery. Anterior interventricular artery runs in anterior interventricular groove, wind round the inferior border, enters into posterior interventricular groove, where it terminates by anastomosing with posterior interventricular branch of right coronary artery. Circumflex artery wind round the left border. Circumflex, it is winding round the left border, enters into posterior atrioventricular groove and terminates by anastomosing with right coronary artery. Now, if you see the branches of this anterior interventricular artery, it gives off left conus artery, which anastomoses with right conus artery. This left conus artery is supplying the upper part of right ventricle. Then it gives off ventricular branches which supply right ventricle, which is adjacent to this anterior interventricular groove. Then it gives off ventricular branches which supply major part of left ventricle. Here you can see diagonal artery. The arteries arise from the anterior interventricular artery at an acute angle, and they run on the surface of the left ventricle. 2 to 9 diagonal arteries they arise from the anterior interventricular artery to supply the myocardium of left ventricle. Then septal branches. The septal branches, they supply anterior 2/3 of interventricular septum. Coming to the circumflex artery, it gives off left marginal artery, which runs along the left border towards the apex. As it is running along the obtuse margin, now this marginal artery is described as obtuse marginal artery. Then it gives off atrial branches, which supply major part of left atrium, ventricular branches, which supply the left surface of the heart, left surface of the left ventricle. So the left coronary artery is dividing into anterior interventricular artery and circumflex artery. The main branches of anterior interventricular artery are left conus, ventricular branches, diagonal artery, a large ventricular branch supplying major part of left ventricle, then septal branches supplying anterior 2/3 of interventricular septum. Circumflex artery is giving off atrial branches and left marginal artery. Right marginal artery is coming from right coronary artery. It is described as acute marginal artery. Left marginal artery arising from circumflex artery is obtuse marginal artery. Then if you see grossly the distribution of left coronary artery. Left coronary artery supplies major part of left ventricle, except a small part of left ventricle which is adjacent to the posterior interventricular groove, except this area on the inferior surface of the left ventricle, except that part, major part of the left ventricle is supplied by left coronary artery. Then right ventricle, a small part of right ventricle which is adjacent to anterior interventricular groove is supplied by left coronary artery, and major part of left atrium, then anterior 2/3 of interventricular septum. So that is the area of distribution of left coronary artery. Then coronary dominance. The coronary dominance is described based on the origin of this posterior interventricular artery. Now here we use a different terminology while you are describing the branches of this left coronary artery. Here anterior interventricular artery is described as left anterior descending artery. In clinical books, anterior interventricular artery is described as left anterior descending artery. Posterior interventricular artery is described as posterior descending artery, PDA, posterior descending artery. Then depending upon the origin of this posterior interventricular artery, whether it is arising from right coronary artery or whether it is arising from circumflex artery, we describe coronary dominance. Right coronary dominance, posterior interventricular artery is a branch of right coronary artery. Posterior interventricular branch arises from right coronary artery. In that case, right coronary artery supplies AV node, part of inferior surface of left ventricle, and posterior 1/3 of interventricular septum. If the posterior interventricular artery arises from circumflex artery, then it is described as left coronary dominance. Sometimes this posterior interventricular artery arises both from right coronary artery and from circumflex artery, in which case we described as balanced type. Now this is the picture showing the right dominance. So this is the left ventricle and this is the right ventricle. Here you can see the interventricular septum. Anterior 2/3 of the interventricular septum is supplied by this artery, anterior interventricular artery. Whereas posterior 1/3 of interventricular septum is supplied by posterior interventricular artery, which is arising from right coronary artery. And you can see a small part of inferior surface of left ventricle that is supplied by this posterior interventricular artery. If you see the left dominance, posterior interventricular artery is arising from circumflex artery. So you can see this entire left ventricle, including a small part of inferior surface of right ventricle, is supplied by left coronary artery because it is arising from circumflex artery. And in codominance type, this area is supplied by both the arteries. So coronary dominance is described based on the origin of posterior interventricular artery. Right coronary dominance, left coronary dominance, and balance. Then this is the picture showing the distribution of coronary arteries. So this is the right coronary artery. Here you can see the acute marginal artery, which is running along the acute margin, inferior border. And this is the left coronary artery, which is lying in between the left atrium and the pulmonary trunk. Here it is dividing into circumflex artery and anterior interventricular artery. Sometimes the diagonal artery, which normally arises from this anterior interventricular artery, arises from this bifurcation. That means left coronary artery trifurcates into anterior interventricular artery, diagonal artery, and circumflex artery. In that case, the rest of the diagonal arteries, the caliber will be very small. Then the anterior interventricular artery gives off this left conus artery and septal branches which supply anterior 2/3 of interventricular septum. Here you can see one more diagonal artery running towards the apex. And this is the posterior atrioventricular groove, where you can see the right coronary artery is giving off posterior interventricular branch. Now, coming to the variations in the origin of the coronary artery, the normal, you can see this is the anterior aortic sinus, this is the left posterior aortic sinus, and this is the non-coronary sinus, that is right posterior aortic sinus. Normally, the right coronary artery arises from anterior aortic sinus and left coronary artery arises from left posterior aortic sinus, dividing into anterior interventricular branch and circumflex branch. There may be a variation where you can see the circumflex artery is arising from right coronary artery. In that case, it undergoes a retroaortic course to reach the posterior interventricular groove. Whereas anterior interventricular branch is arising directly from the left aortic sinus. In this case, you can see the left coronary artery is arising from anterior aortic sinus. Both the coronary arteries are directly arising from the anterior aortic sinus. And here you can see both the coronary arteries are arising from left posterior aortic sinus. And here, the difference between these two is, here the stem of the left coronary artery is passing in front of the pulmonary trunk. Here the stem of the left coronary artery is passing in between the aorta and the pulmonary artery. So here you can see the same picture. This is the right coronary artery, left coronary artery. Normally the left coronary artery is passing behind. Here the left coronary artery, which is arising from the anterior aortic sinus, may take two different courses. It may pass in front of the pulmonary artery, or it may pass in between the pulmonary artery and the aorta. If it passes in between the pulmonary artery and the aorta, when the outflow is more from the right ventricle and the left ventricle, the artery may be compressed in between these two major blood vessels, leading to disturbed blood flow. So in which case we describe it as malignant type. If it is passing in front of pulmonary trunk, it may the artery will not be compressed. If it is passing in between the two major blood vessels, the artery may be compressed when the ejection is more. Then there may be variation in the position of the opening of the coronary arteries, the coronary ostia. Normally, the coronary ostium will be present below the level of sinotubular junction. This is the level of sinotubular junction. Normally, the artery arises below that level. Sometimes the artery arises above the level of the sinotubular junction, in which case the passage of blood during diastole may be difficult. Then here you can see the orifice of left coronary artery is slit-like, where the blood flow may be compromised. Then myocardial bridging. Myocardial bridging is a congenital anomaly where a segment of coronary artery is overlapped by myocardium. Here you can see anterior interventricular artery. That is the artery which is more prone for myocardial bridging. A segment of anterior interventricular artery is overlapped by myocardium. So during systole, this myocardium may compress the artery, leading to decreased blood supply to the distal segment. Based on the amount of myocardium which is overlapping that segment, you can describe this myocardial bridging into superficial type and deep type. Here you can see major part of artery is part of myocardium is overlapping the artery. Here you can see only a small part of myocardium is overlapping the artery. Here the artery is running just beneath the epicardium. So the artery which is more prone for myocardial bridging is left anterior descending artery, that is anterior interventricular artery. So these are the common anomalies what you come across in relation to the coronary arteries. Then coming to the venous drainage, there are three major ways of venous drainage. One is coronary sinus. 80% of venous blood is being drained into the right atrium through coronary sinus. There are some veins which drain the anterior wall of the right ventricle, anterior cardiac veins, and they directly open into the right atrium. Without opening into the coronary sinus, they directly open into the right atrium. about 20% of venous blood is being drained into the right atrium through anterior cardiac veins. Then venae caudis minimi. These veins, they directly open into various chambers of the heart. Now, if you see the coronary sinus is the large vein of the heart, which is situated in posterior part of atrioventricular groove. Posterior part of atrioventricular groove. And the coronary sinus is terminating into the right atrium, where the opening is present in between the inferior vena cava opening and right atrioventricular orifice. And the opening of coronary sinus is guarded by Tibacean wall. Now, what are the various tributaries of this coronary sinus? The great cardiac vein, which is running in the anterior interventricular groove, wind round the left border of the heart and terminates into the left end of the coronary sinus. So this great cardiac vein accompanies anterior interventricular artery. Then there is middle cardiac vein, which accompanies posterior interventricular artery. It runs in posterior interventricular groove and terminates into the coronary sinus. Small cardiac vein. This vein is running in the right atrioventricular groove, wind around the inferior border and terminates into the right end of the coronary sinus. Apart from these three major veins, great cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein and small cardiac vein. Great cardiac vein in anterior interventricular groove, middle cardiac vein in posterior interventricular groove, small cardiac vein in right atrioventricular groove. There is posterior vein of left ventricle, which drains the inferior surface of left ventricle and terminates into the coronary sinus. Then there is an oblique vein of left atrium, which terminates into the coronary sinus. The other veins are the anterior cardiac veins. These veins, they drain the anterior surface of the right ventricle and terminate directly into the right atrium. So here you can see the opening. This is the right atrioventricular orifice. This is the opening of inferior vena cava. In between the two, there is opening of coronary sinus guarded by Tibacean wall. And this is the picture showing the coronary sinus terminating into the right atrium. So the posterior wall of the right atrium has been removed. Here you can see the right atrioventricular orifice guarded by tricuspid wall, and you can see the anterior cardiac veins opening into the right atrium. This is the coronary sinus terminating in between the right atrioventricular orifice and inferior vena cava opening. This is the middle cardiac vein. Then veins from the left atrium, they are terminating into the coronary sinus, and the great cardiac vein is terminating at the left end of the coronary sinus. Then coming to the anastomosis. Now, coronary arteries are not the end arteries. End arteries are those arteries which don't have a precapillary anastomosis. Coronary arteries, they anastomose with each other at various levels. There is interarterial anastomosis. In between the arteries, there is anastomosis. Then, in between the artery and the vein, there is anastomosis. So, at various levels, the arteries are anastomosing with one another. But that anastomosis is impervious. So, physiologically, coronary arteries, they behave like end arteries, but anatomically, they are not the end arteries. Now, here you can see the artery which is present beneath the epicardium. These are the epicardial arteries. Now, the arteries which are present in the epicardium, they give branches which anastomose with adjacent branches. For example, you have seen right conus artery is anastomosing with left conus artery. That is interarterial anastomosis. Then you have got Kugel's arterial ring, where the atrial branch of left coronary artery anastomoses with atrial branch of right coronary artery. So that is interarterial anastomosis. Now here, the artery is giving off branches which are entering into the myocardium. Now these arteries, intramural arteries, they anastomose with one another. Interarterial anastomosis. Then the artery is breaking up into capillaries. The artery is communicating with the sinusoids. So there are sinusoids present within the myocardium. Now here you can see the artery is communicating with the sinusoids. This is called arteriosinusoidal anastomosis. Now the artery is directly opening into the lumen of the chamber. Arterioluminal anastomosis. Then here you can see the vein which is directly opening into the lumen. Sinoluminal anastomosis. vein which is communicating with the sinusoid, sinusoidal anastomosis. Then the sinusoid is communicating with the lumen, lumino-sinusoidal anastomosis. So interarterial anastomosis, arteriovenous anastomosis, arteriosinusoidal, arterioluminal, sinusinusoidal, sinoluminal, and sinusoidoluminal. So anastomosis is present at various levels, but this anastomosis remains impervious. Then that is a description of the blood supply of the heart. To understand the cardiac pain, so you should have a brief knowledge regarding the nerve supply of the heart. The heart is supplied by cardiac plexus. This cardiac plexus is formed by sympathetic and parasympathetic fibers. The sympathetic fibers are derived from upper 5 thoracic segments of the spinal cord. And these sympathetic fibers are cardioaccelerating. They tend to increase the heart rate, they tend to increase the force of contraction. The parasympathetic fibers are derived from vagus. And these parasympathetic fibers are cardio-inhibitory. Now, cardiac plexus is formed by, include superficial cardiac plexus, which is located below arch of aorta, and deep cardiac plexus, which lies behind the arch of aorta. Now, here you can see the parasympathetic fibers which are passing through the vagus and they are reaching the cardiac plexus. The preganglionic neurons, preganglionic parasympathetic fibers, they are passing through the vagus and they reach the ganglia which are present within the cardiac plexus. The postganglionic plexus, the postganglionic fibers, they supply the heart. So these are cardio-inhibitory, parasympathetic efferent fibers. Then coming to the sympathetic fibers, sympathetic efferents, they are taking origin in upper 4 or 5 thoracic segments of the spinal cord. These preganglionic fibers, they reach the thoracic sympathetic ganglia, upper 4 or 5 thoracic sympathetic ganglia. Then they are ascending up and they are reaching the cervical sympathetic ganglia. The postganglionic fibers, which are arising from cervical sympathetic ganglia and upper 4 or 5 thoracic sympathetic ganglia, they reach and they heart and they form the cardiac plexus and they are distributed to the heart. These are cardioaccelerated. Now coming to the afferent fibers, the parasympathetic afferent fibers, which are carrying the pressure sensations and chemical sensations, they pass through the vagus and they reach the higher centers. These are carrying the sensations from baroreceptors and chemoreceptors. They are the parasympathetic afferent fibers. Whereas the sympathetic afferent fibers, which are carrying the pain sensations from the heart, cardiac pain, they pass through the sympathetic nerves and they reach the thoracic segments of the spinal cord through the dorsal roots of upper 4 or 5 thoracic dorsal roots of upper 4 or 5 spinal nerves. These dorsal roots, they also bring the somatic afferent sensations from the respective dermatomes T1 to T4, and these two, the sympathetic afferents and the somatic afferents, they synapse on the same interneuron within the thoracic segments of the spinal cord. And these sensations, they are being carried to the higher centers. So this explains why the cardiac pain is being referred onto the medial side of the arm, medial side of the forearm, and anterior aspect of the thorax to the respective dermatomes. And these sympathetic fibers, which are carrying the pain sensations, predominantly they reach the thoracic segments of the spinal cord from left side. That is the reason why pain is predominantly being referred to the left side of medial aspect of the left arm, left forearm, and anterior aspect of the left thoracic wall. So I will not go to the in-depth of description of the cardiac plexus. So that I would like to come to conclude my discussion on the distribution of the coronary arteries. Hope this will be a good background for you to understand the clinical picture, what sir is going to describe. So thank you for your patience here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Murli, for such an elucidative description of the blood supply and the anatomy of the heart. So I think we can have a short question and answer session now. Dr. Vinay, are there questions?
No, ma'am. In chat box, I didn't get any questions.
Okay.
So audience, if you have any doubts or any questions, please, you can ask directly. Or you can just raise your hands, or you can just type in the chat box.
Otherwise, we go ahead with the next presentation if nobody is asking anything.
Anyone has got any doubts?
I think you'll have to unmute them, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. But if anybody raises hand, I can just unmute, ma'am.
I think nobody wants to. There are certain questions. So if there are no questions, I think we can go over to Dr. Bakshi for his deliberations. So shall we start?
Okay, ma'am. We can start, I think, ma'am. If any questions are there at the end, also we can take it, ma'am.
Yeah.
Give me a couple of minutes.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir.
Before I
Okay,
share.
sir.
Mhm.
Okay, sir. So the students of AIMS Guwahati, no questions as usual. Yes.
My slides are visible.
Yes. Yes.
It is visible,
Slide
sir.
is
You have to
visible.
enlarge the slides.
Just have to put it in the slideshow mode.
Yes, yes. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes,
You
sir.
are
Yes, sir.
audible, sir. But before you start, I think I will just give a brief
Okay.
introduction.
No problem.
Okay, so now this is the session for which we have all waited. Session to be deliberated by our eminent invited speaker, invited cardiologist, Dr. Ananda Bakshi. Dr. Bakshi has a brilliant academic career starting from his schooling, and he is an alumnus of Guwahati Medical College. So I think all of us can relate to that. I would like to mention here that during his PG days in Guwahati Medical College, he was our teacher in medicine. So we are very lucky to have you here, sir, today. His professional experience encompasses a wide range of areas. He is the visiting physician and cardiologist attached to many renowned hospitals in Kolkata since 1989. He is presently attached to ILS Hospital, Kolkata as senior medical consultant and cardiologist. He has bagged a number of professional awards and fellowships of prestigious organizations, including the prestigious membership of Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, Glasgow, UK. He is also a member of a number of professional and social organizations, in addition to being a regular columnist in the medical as well as non-medical periodicals. Sir, we are happy to have you here amongst us today. Our participants must be impatiently waiting to learn from you. Over to you, sir.
So thank you, Professor Runmani Dekha, for your kind words of introduction. And I feel privileged to be here with you as invited by you on this famous World Heart Day. As you all know, 29th September is World Heart Day being solemnized all over India. And today's slogan is connect heart to protect heart. So, respected Director Dr. Geetanjali Padmanabhan of Bhubaneswar AIMS, esteemed faculties from AIMS Guwahati, and my beloved students. Before starting my talk, on this auspicious day, World Heart Day, I would like to pay my respect and homage to all our colleagues who has led their lives while treating the COVID victims. So they are the COVID warriors. By paying homage, I will start my talk. Today, I will be discussing about coronary artery disease and overview. Just now, you have heard a fantastic talk on coronary anatomy from Dr. Murali. Some of the things I might repeat, please excuse me for that. Slides are not moving. Sorry. So this is my disclaimer. I'll be discussing the whole subject under these following headings, starting from the prevalence to little bit about anatomy, not much, of course, types of the disease, signs, symptoms, management, both medical, interventional, surgical, and newer advances, as well as prevention. Now coming to what is coronary artery disease, first we have to understand this. It occurs due to narrowing or complete blockage of one or more coronary arteries due to the formation of plaque inside the arteries. So plaque is the hallmark, plaque formation is the hallmark in the development of coronary artery disease. It is made up of fatty material, RBC, platelet, and fibrin. And coronary atherosclerosis is mainly responsible for this plaque formation. So in the background of coronary atherosclerosis, plaque formation occurs, and this plaque gradually increases in size, ultimately causes either total or near total obstruction, resulting the obstruction in the blood flow to the cardiac muscle, which become ischemic. When typical precordial pain, which we call angina, occurs, and discomfort also starts. Sometimes this plaque suddenly gets ruptured, producing a red thrombus which occludes a coronary artery, resulting in acute myocardial infarction, which we call a heart attack, which may be sometimes life-threatening. So this is just to make you understand, my students. Just to make you understand, this is the normally coronary lumen, and this is the plaque formation has started and lumen narrowing has started. Here you see there is plaque has increased, causing a definite restriction of the coronary flow. Again, here the normal lumen, and here the plaque formation is there, and plaque has almost obstructed the coronary lumen. And here you see how the plaque formation starts. You can see here, and it causes the critical narrowing of the coronary arteries. Now coming to the prevalence of coronary arteries, as you all know, the cardiovascular disease causes 31% cause of death all over the globe, out of which ischemic heart disease causes 42.5%, and hypertensive heart disease causes 6.5%, and rheumatic heart disease causes 1%. Now, 126 million individuals globally are suffering from this coronary artery disease. We also call coronary heart disease and ischemic heart disease. So the incidence is 1,655 per million, and 1.72% of the world's population. Now again, South Asians have a 3 to 5 times higher risk of myocardial infarction, and also present at an early age with more severe disease compared to Caucasians. And South Asian origin is well known independent risk factor for increased mortality associated with CAD. And it has been seen that when the South Asian people migrated to USA or UK, they bear the same risk. So with this understanding, we think that there must be something genetic why they should suffer more, these South Asian people. Let us see. Apart from this genetic predisposition, inhabitants of this region have a high prevalence of traditional risk factors like hypertension, hyperlipidemia, diabetes mellitus, as well as smoking, leading to the development of CAD at a younger age group. And there are some other novel risk factors too. What are those? There's lipoprotein little a, apolipoprotein B100, and homocysteine have been identified in South Asians contributing for CAD risk, which is independent traditional risk factors. So, coming to the Indian prevalence, non-communicable diseases account for nearly 60% of total deaths in India, out of which CAD is one of the major causes. About 2 out of 10 deaths occur from CAD in adults are less than 65 years of age. In India, CAD accounted for 26.9% of medically certified death in as per data of 2015, and about 18.2 million adults of age 20 years or more have CAD as per data of 2017. And urban-rural ratio is urban population prevalence is 9.7%, and in rural population it is 2.7%. And CAD burden is highest in 3 Indian states as per the statistics. One is Punjab, next is Haryana, and third is Tamil Nadu. And lowest in our 3 northeastern states like Mizoram, Meghalaya, and Arunachal Pradesh. So high prevalence of CAD risk factors, genetic predisposition, along with treatment delays and suboptimal use of the evidence-based treatment while managing CAD are common in India. So why there is upsurge, I have already mentioned, is linked to the genetic predisposition, economic and social changes, and its after effect like changes in dietary habits, rapid urbanization and sedentary lifestyle, and increased incidence of hypertension and diabetes. This is very, very important. We can group the total cardiovascular disease under 2 headings. One is heart related, one is vessel related. Heart related disease again may be structural heart disease or maybe coronary artery disease. Today our point of discussion will be definitely coronary artery disease. What are the structural heart diseases? Like valve related disease, like congenital heart disease, like cardiomyopathy, like heart failure, etc. And coronary heart disease may be stable coronary artery disease or chronic ischemic heart disease and acute onset disease, which may be again ST elevation myocardial infarction or non-ST elevation myocardial infarction, and as well as unstable angina. I'll come to those things. And vessel related disease like peripheral vascular disease, aortic dissection, pulmonary embolism, these are the vessel related disease. I'm not going coronary anatomy much. These are the pictures of coronary, right coronary artery as well as left coronary artery. This Dr. Murli has described. The LC arises from the aorta within the left cusp of aortic valve and feeds blood to the anterior and left side of the heart, including the 2/3 of the intraventricular septum. RCA originates within the right cusp of the aortic valve. It travels down the right coronary sulcus towards the crux of the heart, as you have heard from Dr. Murli's talk. These coronary arteries are also known as epicardial arteries because they run on the outer surface of the epicardium, and the coronary arteries are about the width of a drinking straw, approximately 4 millimeters in size, and gradually taper as they descend down. So branches, I'll speak 1 or 2 words about this branching. The left coronary branches of left coronary artery is left anterior descending artery. As a physician, we call it widowmaker because we have seen in many cases blockage of this artery causes a massive heart attack with the involvement of the right and left fascicles, and with a high death rate if not treated urgently and promptly, hence the name widowmaker. And left circumflex artery supplies the left side of the heart, and in 40% cases, posterior descending artery comes from the left circumflex artery. And often from the bifurcation of the LAD and LCX, another artery, ramus or intermediate artery, also occurs. And branches of right coronary artery, Dr. Murali has described in details. It supplies the sinoatrial node and AV node. Why I mention this? Because in cases of infraoval myocardial infarction, when right coronary artery is mostly blocked, there is we often find there is associated complete heart block due to the blockage of the artery supplying the AV node. So this is important. And posterior descending artery in 60% cases arises from right coronary artery, and it supplies the posterior surface of the heart. Sometimes in cases of infraoval myocardial infarction, when the obstruction is in the proximal right coronary artery, there is infarction of the posterior wall too, which we'll have to find by taking the right ventricular leads in the ECG. Coronary veins, you have heard totally greater cardiac veins, coronary sinus, and smaller cardiac venous system. Now coming to the most important thing, signs and symptoms of coronary artery disease. The major symptoms are precordial pain or retrosternal pain or discomfort with suffocating feelings. This is very, very important. There are so many causes of chest pain. People come to us with chest pain thinking that he had got some cardiac problem. But when a patient comes to us and tells us about the nature of the pain, we can most of the time, we can often diagnose that this is a cardiac pain of cardiac origin. So, and associated with lightheadedness, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, weakness, etc. Now, once the coronary arteries become narrow due to plaque buildup, the supply of oxygen-rich blood to the heart is disrupted. There is no doubt about that. As the demand increases during the period when the heart rate increases, such as during exercise, climbing stairs, or any other strenuous activity or emotional stress. And this blocked artery symptoms will not be evident in the initial years, but as the plaque continues to build up inside the arteries, patient may develop certain signs and symptoms. Here are some possible location of the chest pain. From the upper chest, substernal radiating toward the neck or jaw, and here substernal towards the radiating towards the left arm, epigastrium, and epigastrium pain radiating towards neck, and also in the interscapular region as well as left shoulder. These are the possible areas where a coronary pain radiates, and the pain is generally triggered by physical or emotional states. Mind that I reiterate the word emotional, and usually goes away within minutes of stopping the stressful activity like exercise. Patient often tells us that, sir, well, I was running or doing the morning walk, brisk walking, I get pain. But when I stop, the pain goes. You are immediately to suspect that he's having some coronary ischemia. The pain may be fleeting or sharp and is felt in the neck, arm, or back, as I have shown you. As the demand for oxygen-rich blood increases, the heart struggles to pump enough blood to meet the needs of the body. This may cause shortness of breath or extreme fatigue with exertion. Sometimes patient complains that, sir, at night I get difficulty in breathing, and I used to move to the near the window to get some fresh air to get breathing. This we call paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea, which is very, very suspicious. And as the disease progresses, plaque is growing. It causes complete blockage of the coronary arteries. This results in a complete disruption of the blood flow to the heart, resulting in a heart attack or myocardial infarction. It can manifest as a crushing pressure in the chest and pain in the shoulder, arm. I have already shown, sometimes with shortness of breath and sweating as well as vomiting. And this needs immediate medical attention. Now, coming to the possible risk factors that may lead to blocked artery, knowing fully about the symptoms. Risk factors may be non-modifiable risk factors, like I've already mentioned about genetic predisposition, age, male, sex, and there are some modifiable risk factors like obesity. This is a very, very important risk factors. Lack of physical activity or sedentary lifestyle. Last but not the least is hypertension and the role of smoking. Because in many individuals, Indians are having diabetes and hypertension. If they smoke, that increases the chance of getting a CV event at least 32 to 40%. And of course, dyslipidemia as well as hyperuricemia or high uric acid level. So these are the risk factors in a nutshell. This is the cardiovascular continuum and role of hypertension and CAD. It starts from the risk factors. As I have already mentioned, that hyperlipidemia, hypertension, diabetes, and smoking leads to the initiation of the process of atherosclerosis, leading to coronary heart disease, myocardial ischemia, ultimately leading to coronary thrombosis and myocardial infarction, which may lead to again arrhythmias and may cause sudden death, or it may cause remodeling of the ventricular system, leading to ventricular enlargement, ultimately leading to congestive heart failure as well as death. This is the cardiovascular continuum. Now, recognizing the different types of CAD, as I have already mentioned, that it may be a chronic disease, it may be an acute disease. So, coronary artery disease or coronary heart disease is a spectrum of disease. On one end of the spectrum, this is a stable disease. We call it stable angina. Or in other end of the disease, there is ST elevation MI. And in between the two, there is unstable angina as well as non-ST elevation MI. What happens in stable disease or stable angina? Stable atheromatous plaque narrows the lumen. Definitely there is plaque. Oxygen demand exceeds supply during the exertion or emotion, but there is no myocyte damage and blood troponin levels are normal, and anginal pain occurs brought on by some physical exertion and relieved quickly by rest or GTN. And ECG is normal at rest, ST depression on exertion. Next is unstable angina. Plaque become unstable and sometimes ruptures. Bleeding and thrombus causes partial occlusion. And clot or plaque microemboli block smaller arteries downstream. Minimal myocyte damage to troponin usually normal, but maybe slightly raised. Angina at rest or on minimal exertion is prolonged only a short-lived relief with GTN. And there is definite ST depression with T-wave inversion in the ECGs. And non-ST elevation MI, thrombus causes intermittent occlusion, blood and oxygen supply is compromised, myocyte deprived oxygen for more than 20 minutes, die off, releasing troponin in the blood. Troponin reaches a peak level at 12 hours and stays elevated for up to 14 days. And prolonged heavy chest pain, which may spread to throat, jaw, arms, as well as in the back, associated with pallor, sweating, breathlessness, etc. And there is definite ST depression and T-wave inversion, but no ST segment elevation. This is the difference between non-ST elevation MI and ST elevation MI, where there is complete occlusion and there is ST elevation in the corresponding leads, and or the development of the new left bundle branch block. This is the difference. One is in non-ST elevation MI, there is ST depression, and ST elevation MI, there is ST elevation. Now coming how to diagnose. You are to diagnose the patient. The easiest and simplest is the electrocardiogram or ECG, by which we can diagnose at the earliest. We are to do some blood tests like blood sugar to exclude diabetes, lipid profile, uric acid, creatinine, and homocysteine, as well as lipoprotein little a, to exclude the predisposing factors, and echocardiogram, which will give the functional status of the heart and the damage, the extent of the damage to the heart. And exercise stress test we do not do at the acute settings. Pharmacological stress tests like dobutamine stress echo, and coronary artery calcium score. I'll spend a minute on this calcium coronary artery calcium score later. CT angiogram and nuclear imaging, this is very, very important. But the gold standard is coronary angiogram. This is a simple picture from the coronary angiogram. While you do that, you can see the both arteries, right coronary and the left coronary, as well as their branches. Now, about the coronary artery calcium score, as the process of atherosclerosis is on inside the artery, there is deposition of calcium particles on the wall of the artery. And with CT angio, we can measure and give a scoring system to measure this coronary artery calcium. And this score plays an important role in the CV risk stratification, showing a significant association with the medium or long-term occurrence of major CV events in 65 to 80% cases. So score 0, no identified plaque. Score 1 to 10, minimal plaque burden. Score 100, 11 to 100, mild plaque burden, mild or minimal CAD. 101 to 400, moderate plaque burden, moderate non-obstructive CAD, highly likely. Still now obstruction is not critical. But if the score is more than 400, extensive plaque burden, and there is severe coronary stenosis or severe coronary artery disease in at least one artery, we must be very, very careful. Now, coming to the management of CAD, this is the process of atherosclerosis, a diagrammatic representation. We can see here the lipid core, the necrotic core, and the management of CAD. One is preventive aspect, one is treatment aspect. And the role of lifestyle modification cannot be overemphasized in the prevention of coronary artery disease. The important parameters are balanced diet, physical activity, cessation of smoking, moderate alcohol, weight management, and reducing stress, as well as cardiac rehabilitation. These are the parameters for lifestyle modification. Coming to the diet, we advise total calorie intake less than 2000, out of which 50 to 60% should come from carbohydrates, 1100 kilocalorie from carbohydrate. It comes from 275 grams of carbohydrate, each gram giving 4 kilocalories. And regarding the dietary fibers, as Madam Director has already told during her introductory speech, that dietary fiber has got an important role. So dietary fiber intake should be more than 25 grams per day. Regarding protein, the 50% of the calorie should come from protein. So 300 kilocalories from 75 grams of protein, each gram giving 4 kilocalories, and combination of essential and non-essential amino acids. And 25 to 30% of the fats should come from energy should come from fat. So 66 gram of fat is needed per gram, giving 9 kilocalories. And there is a great role of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Now coming to the physical activity, all you need to do is 30 minutes of moderate level physical activity at least 5 days a week. Example of such activities are brisk walking, freehand exercise, bicycling, swimming, and gardening, or at least 10,000 steps per day of work. Smoking, as I have already shown, the smoking should be strictly stopped, because especially in diabetics and hypertensive patients, because the association of CAD in diabetics or hypertensive is very, very high. So for all practical purposes, we are to advise the patient to stop smoking immediately. If you drink, do not exceed the maximum recommended limit of 30 ml per day or 5 days a week. And weight and stress reduction is also has got a very good role. 18.5 BMI should be between 18.5 to 23.5 here. So stress and meditation and yoga has got a great role. And I'll spend a minute for cardiac rehabilitation. This has been very, very important in modern day cardiac care center after an attack of myocardial infarction. The primary aim of such program is to reduce the future risk of complications, to regain strength and confidence of the patient so that he can go back to his profession at the earliest. Here we may need some psychological counseling, because after an attack of myocardial infarction, patient becomes very much shaky to join in his service or join in his profession. And here the role of psychologist is very high, and to improve the quality of life. And coming to the medical management, when a patient of acute MI comes to the emergency department, first thing comes to our mind, where there is no facility for cardiac catheterization, the first thing comes to our mind is to start the thrombolytic therapy. So this has been a major advance in the management of acute myocardial infarction. To be more precise, for STEMI, this therapy works by lysing infarct artery thrombi and achieving reperfusion, thereby reducing infarct size, preserving LV function, and improving the survival. So it has got a great role in the early management of acute myocardial infarction, especially STEMI. In non-STEMI cases, we do not give or we do not inject this thrombolytic therapy. First use of this therapy in acute myocardial infarction was reported by Fletcher and colleagues in 1958. The first drug used was streptokinase, was associated with 51% reduction in mortality. And contraindication for thrombolysis are the acute active bleeding conditions. You are to ask the patient whether he has got a bleeding peptic ulcer, or he has got a bleeding piles, or he has got a history of intracerebral hemorrhage within last 3 months or 6 months, or any evidence of cerebral vascular malformation or history of aortic dissection. These are the things to be excluded, but menstruation is not an exclusion for giving the thrombolysis therapy. Now coming to some newer drugs, newer fibrinolytics have started coming. are being developed to improve the efficacy of clot lysis and or ease of administration. Novel plasminogen activators like Retiplase, Altiplase, Tenecteplase, which is nowadays very much used, and Lantoplase have been developed with better efficacy and less adverse effects. Other drugs in the pipeline are Saruplase, single chain recombinant urokinase plasminogen activator, and staphylokinase produced by Staphylococcus aureus. There are some adjunctive therapies which are used in cases, especially unstable angina. They are glycoprotein 2B3A receptor antagonist. Drug is abciximab, or direct thrombin inhibitors like bivalirudin, and low molecular weight heparin like fondaparinux. These drugs are being used in these coronary artery diseases in acute settings. And apart from this thrombolysis, we are to use many drugs to control the associated things. As I have already mentioned, that these coronary heart disease patients are mostly hyperlipidemic, maybe diabetic. So we start with cholesterol modifying medications. They are statins like rosuvastatin, atorvastatin. They have got enough data for the prevention of coronary artery disease. Fibrates, fenofibrates, as well as niacinamide, nowadays not much used. They reduce or modify the primary material that deposits on the coronary arteries. I have already mentioned that these cholesterol particles are deposited to form the plaque. As a result, cholesterol levels, especially low density lipoprotein or bad cholesterol, decrease. And antiplatelets, they have got a great role. Whenever a patient comes, a patient of MI comes to us, we always give them aspirin and clopidogrel in a dose of 300 milligrams stat and aspirin 325 milligrams stat to reduce the tendency of your blood to clot, which may help prevent obstruction of your coronary arteries. Now coming to the beta blockers, these are very important drugs. Metoprolol, bisoprolol, and carvedilol, they are mostly cardioselective beta blockers, slows the heart rate and decreases blood pressure, also decreases the myocardial oxygen demand. This is very important. At that time, demand for oxygen should be high. These drugs reduces the myocardial oxygen demand. Calcium channel blockers like amlodipine, nifedipine, etc. use helps to improve the symptoms of chest pain. And nitroglycerin, everybody knows it, sorbitrate, dilates coronary artery. These are coronary vasodilator and reducing the heart demand for blood. And last but not the least is AC inhibitors and ARB. I don't know whether preclinical students know about these drugs, but these are very important drugs like enalapril, ramipril, and ARBs are statins. They cause vasodilation by blocking the RAS system. I think they have read the RAS system in their physiology curriculum, causes evidence-based mortality reduction after acute myocardial infarction. Now coming to the intervention, these are the chapter for non-invasive therapy. Now I am coming to the invasive therapy. Coronary angioplasty with the placement of a stent is a very effective modality of treatment of acute myocardial infarction. It may be primary coronary angioplasty. When patient reaches the cardiac catheterization enabled cardiac center within 90 minutes of an MI, so dot to balloon time we call it. Suppose they stay in the city of Guwahati, maybe near AIIMS Guwahati or maybe GMC, they can be immediately taken to the GMC OPD and immediately primary coronary angioplasty can be done there. Immediate angioplasty and stent placement can be done to relieve the symptoms. And next is pharmacoinvasive therapy. Suppose patient stays a bit outside They cannot be brought to the catheterization center, enabled center within 90 minutes. So this is called pharmacoinvasive therapy. First, we give the thrombolysis therapy, as I already mentioned. Then they can be shifted on the next day or day after to the catheterization enabled center to get the this angioplasty done. And third is elective coronary angioplasty. When symptom persists in spite of optimal medical management and lifestyle measures, in those cases, coronary angiogram followed by coronary angioplasty is the treatment of choice. Now, a little bit about the coronary stent. I have mentioned about the coronary angioplasty, but what is stent? A coronary stent is a tube-shaped metallic mesh-like device with polymer coating placed inside a coronary artery using a procedure called PCI, percutaneous coronary intervention, to keep a narrowed artery open as a part of the treatment of coronary artery disease. This is a very effective treatment, and coronary stents are now used in more than 90% of procedures. There are generally 3-4 types of stent. To start with, it was bare metal stents, but there are incidences of restenosis of the stent. So nowadays, the improved version of drug-eluting stents or drug-coated stents, there are mainly 2 drugs which are used. One is sirolimus and one is paclitaxel. These drugs are coated in the stents so that the incidence or chances of restenosis or stent thrombosis can be minimized. These are the reasons this is a very effective but though costly. And bioresorbable scaffold system, these are the latest generation of stents. They automatically absorbs inside the arteries, and drug-eluting balloons, again the same thing. So I have shown the placement of stents. You can see using cardiac catheterization technique, a balloon in the tip of the catheter is inflated in the narrowed portion of the artery to widen the blocked artery, and is metallic mesh, as you can see in the picture B and picture C, is placed so that the arterial wall can be kept open. And after the stent is placed, the artery is held open, which allows the blood to flow through the previously blocked artery, as you can see from this picture A. Now, coronary artery bypass graft is a procedure that restores blood flow to the heart muscle by diverting the flow of blood, bypassing the blockage in the arteries. So what are the indications? The multivessel CAD, when stent placement is not possible, especially in diabetic patients. And 2 types of graft being used. One is saphenous graft, as you can see in the diagram. The blue colored is taken from the saphenous vein of the leg, and it bypasses the blocked areas, but the chances of restenosis again is little bit high in venous graft. So nowadays the arterial grafts are preferred. Where from this arterial graft comes? From the right internal memory. You can see from this diagram, this right internal memory as well as left internal memory. We call it RIMA Lima Y. RIMA means right internal memory artery, Lima means left internal memory artery. There is Y-shaped this thing anastomosis to just cross the blocked areas. This is a very effective procedure. Now, coming to some advances in the treatment of CAD, there are a lot of advances. Nanotechnology has come in, gene therapy, stem cell therapy, and also robotic CABG. These are the newer things which are coming up. I'll spend 1 or 2 minutes on these newer therapies. This is the gene therapy after MI. Angiogenic gene therapy after an MI may become a clinically relevant approach to improve the engraftment of implanted cells if targeted delivery can be accomplished non-invasively. The ultrasound targeted microbubble destruction, this is the process, this is the technique UTMD, ultrasound targeted microbubble destruction technique, uses myocardial contrast echocardiography to target this angiogenic plasmid gene delivery to the myocardium, which features low toxicity, limited immunogenicity, and potential for vascular endothelial growth. So in the coming years, I don't know whether gene therapy will take place of this angioplasty, maybe thrombolysis therapy. So UTM technique successfully delivered genes like vascular endothelial growth factor and stem cell factor into the infarcted heart, improves myocardial perfusion and ventricular function. Now again, stem cell therapy after MI, stem cell therapy offers a promising approach to the regeneration of the damaged vascular and cardiac tissue after an acute myocardial infarction. This has resulted in multiple RCTs worldwide. In world trial, stem cell therapy has achieved positive results in over 45% of patients with improvement in less than 6 months. But in our country, India, we are in the nascent stage, still trying hard. Now, coming to the advantage of robotic surgery, again, this robotic surgery is in the offing. So it reduces the hospitalized stay, intraoperative time is less, precision is more, invasiveness is less, radiation exposure is less, and bleeding is less. These are some important factors why we'll choose robotic CABG in the coming years. So, my dear students, I have come to the end of my talk, and this is the take-home message of my talk. The coronary artery disease, also known as coronary heart disease or ischemic heart disease, is a globally prevalent disease, and Indians, especially the young Indians, are particularly susceptible to this disease. Rapid urbanization, improved economic solvency, sedentary lifestyle, easy availability of fatty foods, coupled with increasing prevalence of diabetes and hypertension, and as well as hyperlipidemia, are the main reasons for its increase. Central chest pain or precordial pain, along with breathlessness and suffocation, are the cardinal symptoms. But in diabetics, there may be silent ischemia. We must not forget it. ECG is the most common and easily available investigation of choice, but coronary angiogram is certainly the gold standard. In centers where cath lab facilities are unavailable, pharmacological thrombolysis is the choice of therapy, but in cath lab available setups, coronary angioplasty with stent placement is ideal. And CABG is the choice of therapy in multivessel CAD, especially in diabetics, where there is definite mortality benefits. Newer therapies like gene therapy, stem cell therapy, newer thrombolytics, as I have already shown, bioresorbable stents, and robotic CABG are coming up as new modalities of treatment in the coming years. And prevention programs and cardiac rehabilitation programs after an MI should be set up to improve the quality of life. So thank you very much, my dear students, esteemed faculties, for your kind listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Ma'am.
Thank you very much, sir, for your extensive explanation and the detailed elucidation of the whole subject. It was really wonderful listening to you. We can, I think, now have a few questions. I could see some
Yes,
questions in the chat box.
Yes.
So if Vinay, if you could just.
Yes, ma'am. Sir, one student has asked about what is myocardial oxygen demand. Can you explain to them, sir?
Is basically a physiology question. Actually, in a normal state, the arteries, the coronary arteries supplied oxygenated blood to the myocardial tissue, through which this tissue survives. And when the obstruction is there in the coronary arteries, the blood flow is restricted. So myocardial tissue is not getting the oxygen supply. So they are more become hungry, they are breathless. And as I have already mentioned about the paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea, they go to the near the window to get the fresh air, to get the oxygen. But definitely there is obstruction. Myocardial tissue is not getting oxygen through the coronary arteries. If we cannot do immediate relieve the obstructions, the myocardial tissue will be dead, and in dead tissue cannot be salvaged at the later stage. This is the myocardial oxygen, the physiology of myocardial oxygen demand.
Ayushman, is it clear? If you want, you can ask, you can unmute yourself and you can ask any other doubts. Ayushman Tripathi.
Yes, sir. So the doubt is clear. I was asking what was the role of beta blockers in that to decrease the myocardial oxygen demand?
Beta blockers, what beta blockers do? Beta blockers decreases the heart rate, especially the cardioselective beta blockers. They decrease the heart rate. So if a patient is having heart rate of 140, the myocardial oxygen demand is more. But if the heart rate can be decreased to 70 or 80, the demand will be less. In that way, beta blockers help to reduce the myocardial oxygen demand by reducing mainly by reducing the heart rate, especially the cardioselective beta blockers like bisoprolol, carvedilol, etc., metoprolol.
Thank you, sir. Sir, one more question is there. Why thrombolytic drugs are not given on non-ST elevation myocardial infarction, sir?
Because in ST elevation MI, there is critical blockage. There is complete obstruction. So we are to relieve the complete obstruction immediately. So thrombolytics are preferred. But in non-ST elevation MI, there is no complete obstruction. In those cases, we can rely on other drugs like low molecular weight heparin, like intravenous GTN, and other drugs like aspirin and clopidogrel, and there are so many other drugs. That is the main reason. There is critical blockage or complete obstruction. So there is ST elevation MI. In those cases, we have to relieve the obstruction immediately to make the heart muscle survive.
Ma'am, any other queries, ma'am?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. So these are the few questions, sir, what we got in the chat box.
More questions from anybody else? I think with that we come almost to the near end of our webinar. I wouldn't say the end. I would like to now request Dr. Vinay, Associate Professor of Department of Anatomy, AIIMS, Guwahati, to offer the vote of thanks.
Okay, thank you, madam. So good evening, all. It was a very informative session. To begin with, I would like to thank Dr. Geetanjali Madam, Director, AIIMS, Bhubaneswar. So when we came up with the idea of online webinar, she was kind enough to grant the permission and support to conduct this webinar. Thank you, Madam. I would like to thank Dr. Ananda Bakshi, eminent cardiologist from ILS Hospital, for accepting our invitation as speaker and enlightening our students. The session was very informative, sir. Our students will be benefited for sure with the knowledge shared by Dr. Bakshi in their clinical practice. Thank you, sir. Indeed, it was a pleasure having you with us for enlightening us on heart-related disorders. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our additional professor, Dr. Muralidhar Reddy Sangam, sir, for the wonderful elaborate session on anatomical aspect of blood supply of the heart. Sir has covered the topic in an extensive and easily understandable way. I would like to thank our beloved HOD Madam, Dr. Roonmani Dekha, for our constant support and encouragement from initial step to till date and making this event successful. I would like to thank my colleagues, Dr. Praveen, Dr. Raju Bokan, Dr. Amandeep, and all non-teaching staff for smooth conduction of this webinar. Finally, I would like to thank the participants from all over the country for making this webinar a reality. Without them, this webinar would not have existed. Hope this will be fruitful for you all. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, Dr. Vinay. So just as all good things have to come to an end, we all shall also have to conclude our webinar. But before leaving, I would like to thank each and every one of the participants, speakers, as well as the entire organizing team. Sir, it was a pleasure having you with us. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Sir, if you could just switch on your video. I think our participants would like to at least see you once.
Sir.
Has he left?
I think so.
I think so, has left.
Ah.
Okay. So thanks to everyone.
And
Everybody.
ma'am, one more thing, ma'am. Feedback will be sent to the respective registered email ID, ma'am.
Hmm.
Once they submit the feedback form, they will get the certificate automatically.
Okay. I think sir has rejoined again. He was.
Okay.
Sir, I would like to request you to kindly switch on your video once, please.
Sir, switch on, ma'am.
Dr. Bakshi, sir.
So,
yeah.
Thank you for inviting me on this auspicious day. I was in fact feeling very nostalgic because Guwahati is my alma mater, GMC. That is why immediately I agreed to deliver this talk. I don't know, you can take the feedback. I don't know how much it will be helpful for your students.
Definitely, sir. Thank you so much.
But I'll be very happy if I am called. I'll definitely come and deliver. And this time virtual, maybe next time I can go to Guwahati and deliver the talk. I am very, very happy and thank Runmani for inviting me here. And I also thank Dr. Muralidhar because I knew many things of coronary anatomy from Dr. Muralidhar's talk. I forgot many things, but Dr. Muralidhar has given a fantastic talk on coronary anatomy. In fact, after a long time, I have listened such an illuminating talk on coronary anatomy because for physicians like us, coronary anatomy is very much essential, very, very essential. And such in-depth coronary anatomy I have never heard, at least for long, long years. So thank you for your arranging this webinar on this special World Heart Day.
I think, sir, I will also have to thank your friend, Dr. R.C. Dekha.
Yes, I must thank Ratul for actually.
He is in the webinar.
He's my close friend. We stayed together in the hostel for many years. We passed MD in the same year. So he's very good friend of mine. He first told me about giving a talk on this World Heart Day about coronary heart disease. So I'm very happy.
Thank you, sir.
So please convey my regards to Ratul.
Sure,
and
sir.
Also to you and all the faculties of your department, AIIMS Guwahati.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I think we shall conclude the webinar now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
So, Vinay, shall I leave?
Yes, ma'am. I'll be